also learn how top CMOs are navigating new pressures around AI and the steps you can take to ensure continued relevance and success in light of all these pressures. We're so honored to hear from a distinguished panel of experts today. Lauren Beckstedt, Chief Marketing Officer at Brunswick Corporation, Amy Musolino, former Chief Marketing Officer at General Electric Healthcare, Pharmaceutical Diagnostics Americas, Jonathan Prantner, Chief Analytics Officer at OneMagnify, and our moderator, our very own Brian Meek, co-founder and president of Data Science Connect and professor at the Emory University Center for AI Learning. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. To make this feel a little more in person, we suggest you add a photo to your profile, include your bio, LinkedIn profile, and other information you want your fellow attendees to see. Next, please take advantage of the Q&A and chat features throughout the talks. We're dedicating a portion at the end to Q&A, so be sure to upvote the questions you'd like the panel to address. If you're wondering where your organization stands compared to others on your AI journey, definitely check out the poll questions in the right sidebar. And finally, to learn more about how to leverage AI to enhance customer experience, check out the calls to action below throughout the webinar. Without further ado, let's kick off our panel.
All right, welcome everyone, and welcome to our expert panel here. We'll start off by doing some quick introductions. If each of you could tell us a bit about your background and your current role. We can try to do these in about 30 seconds so we can leave enough time for plenty of panel discussion. So let's start with you, Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren Beckstedt, Chief Marketing Officer for Brunswick Corporation. Brunswick is a category leader in recreational marine across boats, propulsion, and electronics. We're home to brands like Boston Whaler, Sea Ray, Mercury Marine, Simrad, and Lowrance are brands you might be familiar with. I oversee our enterprise brand marketing, and digital product.
Thanks, Lauren. Amy?
Hello, thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here today. So my name's Amy Musolino. I've spent most of my career in a variety of B2B marketing roles in the healthcare industry, covering products, services, software, and solutions. So this includes products for manufacturing of pharmaceuticals, in bulk pharmaceutical excipients. I've been in services and solutions for CRO phase 2-3, clinical studies, clinical research, e-clinical technology for clinical research, supply chain services for global clinical investigative trials. At IQVIA, I was involved in marketing for US and Canada for post-commercialization services, including all the commercialization services that IQVIA did, including data management, information services, market access, real-world solutions, HEOR, staffing, medical device. And then finally, my role at GE just recently was for medical device and then pharmaceutical diagnostics in the oncology, neurology, cardiovascular space.
Super interesting. Lots of good and diverse experiences from both of you guys. Jonathan.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Prantner. I am the Chief Analytics Officer at OneMagnify. And OneMagnify is a marketing services firm that's focused on providing optimal customer experience. And we focus both in the B2B and the B2C world. I've been in media and analytics for the past couple of decades, seeing it from kind of the agency side, seeing it within clients, and also spent quite a bit of time at Nielsen as well. So been able to see it from all sides, and we're really excited to dive into the conversation.
Excellent. So let's start by talking about how you're integrating Gen AI technologies into your current, or AI, not just Gen AI, into your current marketing stack. How are you using that to enhance the customer experience, and what impacts have you noticed? So why don't we kick it off with Lauren?
Well, today I actually used AI to help with my LinkedIn post, and it wrote it better than I did. So that was a quick win. But I'll give you maybe the framework that we use to kind of sort this and let others kind of jump in with how they're leveraging it. But we kind of organize our use cases around experience value you named, as well as engagement value, which is kind of a function of that, and exchange value. And those are all like customer side advantages to deploying AI in our strategies. And then there's kind of internal and operational side values around using it for strategy, using it for operational efficiencies, using it for just better knowledge, better intelligence. I would say on the experience side, we're pretty limited in how we're applying it today. Things like chatbots that you're all familiar with and probably have been for the last 5 to 10 years. We're spending a bit more time on how can we build it into our experience in the long term from an innovation perspective and on a product side. But in terms of what we're doing today, it's a bit more tactical and operational. How are we creating faster efficiencies to let smart people spend more time on their day jobs?
Absolutely. Amy, what have you seen?
So we had really just started to kind of explore AI, I would say, in the last couple years. And I think mostly in the last probably year, 6 to 10 months. And I want to say that we were really in our infancy. I think that the healthcare industry and the pharmaceutical industry as a whole always kind of lags behind in terms of the adoption of sort of new technologies, primarily because we're such a highly regulated industry as a whole in terms of what we can do. And so we tend to be a little bit more conservative when it comes to adopting new things that come out in the market. That being said, I do think that we have a tremendous amount of data that we can leverage. And I do feel as though the industry is moving much more quickly in terms of adopting AI than I've seen it adopt other types of new technological tools that have come out in the past. So we started to use GenAI mostly to develop social and blog first draft content. And that's kind of where we started to experiment with it. We had done some early preliminary tracking of sort of social or voice posting that was out there in the marketplace, just tracking kind of what customers were saying about our products. But it was more so a mechanism to get us started in the content development process. A lot of our other content has a tendency to be very technical or based on in-house market research or in-house medical research. So compliance wouldn't allow that on the internet. So AI was a little less helpful in those respects. I do think that where we could take it to the next step is taking existing published content and potentially using AI to experiment with infographic or blog development from things that we've already published and put out there to see if we can potentially use it in other form content to expand the reach of the existing content that we already had out there. So I think that as our team or as that team becomes more sophisticated in its utilization of AI, that it will find new ways to kind of leverage it and expand its use. That being said, I was actually on a call just an hour or so ago with a really interesting agency working with a very large pharmaceutical company, and they've been utilizing it to speed up doing advertising for their consumer products in terms of just taking the images of their products and being able to develop really innovative advertising instead of having to do photo shoots all around the world. So saving tons of money doing advertising for their products, which we didn't do when I was at my prior company. But I thought that was a really compelling use case of how to use AI and save a ton of money. And she said that the end result was really remarkable. You couldn't even tell the difference, that it wasn't, an on-site photo shoot. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, super interesting. Jonathan, what are you seeing in the space?
So we really see AI is focused primarily around driving that optimal customer experience. And because that relies so heavy on an organization's level of digital maturity, which also includes where they are in that AI maturity. Because what we see is the first thing is usually all around ways in which we can make people more efficient. Kind of, as you said earlier, allowing them to focus not on the mundane tasks, but on going forward. Where we're seeing it have its most powerful impact is once we turn it really around understanding the customer. So customer segmentation and targeting, especially in B2B, being able to identify those high value prospects, tailor the messages, allocate your resources from there. It allows you to create customized content and offers across there. Clients that have put this in place, we see those improved engagement scores and conversion rates. And then Amy was mentioning kind of a little bit of capturing that voice of the customer. And what we do is when we have helped organizations approach this, we do it in kind of a threefold way, where we look at what customers are saying to each other about your brand, what they're saying back to you. This can be either coming through call centers, coming through search terms that they're utilizing, and then what you are saying to them. And a lot of these generative AI models and transformative technology that enables them allows us to create those linkages across there. So then we can use that information about what customers are saying about the brand to help craft the strategy that we have for SEO and for SEM, to use that content to create different customized landing pages based around where we feel that customer's journey is going. And then the final place that we see that making a big impact is also when Amy was talking a little bit about all of those internal documents that they have, using different things like retrieval augmented generation so that you can go and search that content and bring it together and synthesize it quickly for people. So it allows organizations to take advantage of all of that history that they have and pull it forward in a way to either be able to synthesize that content or to create these custom personas.
Yeah, really great points, and a few themes that I'm picking up on here that we're going to get back to over the course of our discussion. So operational efficiencies versus enhancements. So where are places where you can do things that were previously being done by humans and automate them or do them in a way that's at scale. Social media is a great example of that. And that's an example of low complexity content that also has low compliance risk, to Amy's point. And then I think the idea that we're still in the early stages of this and that digital maturity is a major factor in how organizations are going to be rolling this out. And so when you have sophisticated LLMs that can do new things and that can enhance the things that you're already doing from a marketing standpoint, like voice of the customer analysis, segmentation, targeting, mass customization, those are things that are not new with AI, but AI certainly can play a significant role in enhancing those capabilities, but you have to be in a position to leverage it with your data and with your sort of workflows and as an organization with your culture and your strategy. So that leads us to the next question here, which is we often hear this phrase of garbage in, garbage out, and it's definitely true when it comes to leveraging AI. So if you're an organization that's looking to leverage AI in marketing, how do you start preparing and managing your marketing data today so that as more and more AI becomes more and more relevant and available for various different use cases, that you're in the best possible position to use it? So let's start with Jonathan on this one.
So a lot of the techniques are similar techniques that we've been using for data hygiene and the ability to activate it as data. So it's looking at the different data sources we have, pulling from both first party, third party, putting that together, going through a rigorous cleaning process. And then one of the areas that we find a lot of benefit is really focusing in on the metadata for unstructured text, because when we're looking at the large language models, being able to provide the metadata that we have around those to go into standardized prompts to be able to run through that information. So being able to provide information about that customer, existing firmographic segmentations that we have, putting that together. And one piece that has been very effective, the team here wrote an article about this last year, I believe, for the Applied Journal of Marketing Analytics, is around automated cluster generation and labeling. So going through some of these unsupervised techniques that we've been using for years, but taking them in a different way to enable that to define these clusters in a way that's understandable to the end user. And that helps us create a structure for data so that we can better activate it, so that we can use the models to be able to sift through them and pull out the relevant information.
Absolutely. Amy or Lauren, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I would say we organize the risk analysis from input risk and output risk. And your input risk is things like whether it's your IP or somebody else's, and that you're feeding into these models. I actually think you're advantaged if you own more of your own IP. So certainly in Amy's example, you then need to protect it from the outside world. But to the extent that your intelligence is your own and it's a competitive advantage, leveraging that to get to certain analysis, insights, et cetera. And then in a B2B space, considering the implications of that and how you partner in your go-to-market, because to your points earlier, it is still super early days and it's still expensive. There's going to be an expensive learning curve. So you kind of still need some scale, and I think your risk is most mitigated if you're using your own IP. But we sort through and we run through scenario planning on the input risk side and the output risk side. The output risk is, for example, your model starts to give people bad advice, and maybe it's unsafe advice or unhealthy advice, and then who's liable for that, and how do you protect against these things evolving in a way that you don't want them to, or regression towards the mean and things like that. So right now we're doing a heavy amount of just sorting through what we think is the size of the value relatively and the size of the risk on one of these two dimensions. And then we work through use cases and we do tests.
Interesting. Yeah, I think very good points about how you do the risk analysis. I think it's relevant to a lot of different use cases. Amy, what do you think?
I mean, I think those are really great points. For me, I look at the data just sort of more down to the fundamentals and basics, which is that for what I've seen, I'm not a data analyst, so I don't have as much kind of background or insight as perhaps Jonathan does. But from a pure marketer's perspective, data management is a huge challenge for us. We have a lot of disparate systems where data is not coordinated, right? And the data is captured in ways that are not consistent across the systems. Especially if you have a very large organization, you may even have different field teams entering the information in different ways, right? So we have a single, or in other companies I've been in, we've had a single Salesforce platform where you might have multiple field teams entering in information on a contact or entering in, duplicate contacts, which just starts to create a really convoluted system whereby makes it very difficult to start to even collect data on your end users, right? And then you start to look at if you have data going through, your end users going through distribution, right? So you start to lose visibility to how your products are potentially being purchased at some point, right? So you can only see so far to the customer. And so you lose sight of how your marketing is having an impact on buying patterns because you put marketing out there, but then it's being purchased through a distributor. So you lose insight into that. And then even on a kind of a day-to-day basis, we would struggle with getting marketing data from our agencies. And it could just be the fact that our marketing budget perhaps wasn't as big as some other companies, but just getting real-time data feed from our agencies, or getting the data in the format that we needed, or getting the data that we requested, or getting the data from our distributors, right? Those are all things that kind of hampered our ability, even on a manual basis, to make good decisions, much less to be able to be fed into a model that would do it on an automated basis. So things like next best option or next best action felt, very aspirational to me when we couldn't even kind of get the basic data to sort of make decisions manually on a day-to-day basis. So for me, that's the most critical and most difficult challenge that I think we face, which is first to clean the data, which is a huge, monumental project in and of itself, especially if your organization is really large. And then I think the second is a cultural shift, even, right? To kind of change the culture of the organization to how they're entering the data and how they're managing the platform. And then the third is to just implement the systems to utilize the data. I also think it depends too on your organization as to who sort of owns the data platforms and who kind of has the power within the organization. So I think some organizations may be commercially driven, Other organizations are financially driven, some are operationally driven. So, if the operations team is the one that's really utilizing the data platforms to kind of drive operational enhancements, they may be doing it with an AI focus. So they may be modifying the data systems to drive their own objectives or goals. And marketing may just be an add-on, right? So we may just not be a priority to kind of why they're implementing their data changes. So as an example, in the imaging market, for instance, there's a lot of the AI is being used to improve imaging systems and equipment. It's an area where AI can be utilized to help doctors diagnose much earlier tumors or to point them in a certain direction. So in that instance, the data is being used more so in that organization to kind of drive enhancements to the equipment. And that's more important to that organization than it is to enhance marketing, right? So all those decisions to the data platforms are being driven potentially, you would think, in that direction versus enhancing marketing. So there's all those kind of nuances, right, to sort of the challenge of the data strategy within the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great points from all of you. I think one thing that I'm hearing is that it's really important right now to get your arms around these future use cases. I think anybody who's played with ChatGPT for even a few minutes probably immediately thinks of, oh, wow, I could do this and I could do that. And there's all these cool things we could do within our business for, with this technology. And then the more you dig into it, you start uncovering a lot of these problems. Like the data is not, it's siloed. It's not in the right format. There's a risk of using it for various different reasons. There's all kinds of challenges to be able to tap into that data to fully utilize it for some of these really cool AI use cases. And so you don't have to be able to stand up all of these use cases overnight in your organization, but it is important right now to start thinking about what are those use cases going to look like in 1, 2, 5, 10 years, so that we can start positioning ourselves, start getting our data in a place where it's better able to leverage, or AI is better able to leverage that data. So one of the other things that you guys mentioned that was, I think, is very important to those points is that marketers often have to partner with other internal teams in order to make this happen. If you've got to make sure your data is in a certain state, or you've got to get clearances to be able to use it for certain purposes, that's going to involve a lot of working with the data teams, the IT teams, the legal teams in a lot of cases, or compliance teams. And sometimes those teams tend to be more conservative or take a more risk-averse approach to AI than maybe marketers would, or maybe they're just being pulled in a lot of different directions, to Amy's point, that they've got other priorities that they're using that data for. And so their number one goal is not putting it in the best format for marketing necessarily, or making it available to marketing. So can you discuss how you navigate these challenges when you're trying to push your initiatives forward, particularly on the AI front? Lauren or Amy, why don't you start us off?
We have a council. So we have an enterprise risk council that assesses all the AI use cases. There's head of legal, myself, and our head of IT. Often we'll pull in our CHRO if it's talent data related. And as our employees and teams surface different ways they want to leverage an AI tool, or a capability embedded in existing software that leverages AI, they put together just kind of a brief use case that comes to the council and we review it. Honestly, we found it easier for those to come through real time as opposed to meeting with some frequency to review them, because sometimes they're super small. It'll be like, we want to use Canva and there's an AI tool, and that's super easy. Okay, just go use it. And then others are more complex. So we review the charters as they come through, and then the three of us vote that we can either proceed or there are additional assessments required.
Interesting. It's very interesting with the council approach. Amy, what have you seen?
So I actually haven't seen much of that. We weren't really at that stage quite yet in the organizations I've been at yet. I don't know, Jonathan, if you've seen anything or if you've had any experience.
Yeah, we have, and because with this, similar to the points that Lauren was just making, we've really seen the technology side being able to provide a lot of amazing guidance for us. And coming in with that aspect of, hey, we're going to be very clear about our communication. We want to collaborate on this going forward. Because one of the big risks that we have with some of these systems is that the costs can just skyrocket on this. Because especially if we have real-time responses, we want to host these models internally because we're going to fine-tune them based off our own data. What that looks like, being able to figure out the appropriate structures for those and to have that eye and that lens on security. Because one of the things with these tools is the more that they're accessible to people, the more people want to dig into it and use them. And this can be, from the end analysts that, to Lauren's point, is using a certain tool. And so we have lists that we provided internally that we also provide to clients that we work with, recommendations on when to be able to use these technologies in what ways. And then when we get into the teams of, data scientists and machine learning engineers that want to go into this, now we're talking about, they want to work in Python and they want to bring these in, and what system should we have that? How should we house that? We have to be extremely diligent about the way that the data is moving back and forth, because what we need to do is we need to create that balance between risk and innovation. And we always err on the side of security with everything. So we found this successful by demonstrating the success internally. So by creating very small projects, different ways that we can show some of these models can have an impact. Some of these systems can be put in place to solve a small problem, but to build that out and to build that infrastructure in a way that the value of that is being communicated. And so it's really that partnership and the relying on technology from the security and infrastructure side to put guardrails around what the teams are able to dive into.
Yeah, very interesting and great points. I think, and I think the formalized channels are an interesting sort of solution to this, especially as you're trying to stand this up to be a significant part of your business. And I think this is the digital maturity pathway that we talked about, which is, maybe in the past, if you have sort of one-off projects where marketing needs to work with IT or work with a data team or ask something to legal about how we're using data, that's no problem. You can just reach out to your contact and you sort of handle it on a one-off basis for different projects. But as AI use cases become more and more widespread, maybe it makes sense to, and especially in a large organization, to stand up a team around this, a council, where you're able to get all these folks in one room, and there's common touch points and there's standard protocols for how things like access and uses of data are dealt with within the organization, so that nothing kind of falls through the cracks in that regard, and that you're maximizing your opportunities where possible. So that does lead us to the next question as well, which is, where are you feeling pressures to implement AI technology? So is there a pressure to enhance productivity? Is it updating your tech stack, improving your data maturity, undertaking digital transformation initiatives? How are you addressing those pressures? And I think as marketers, it's probably one of the biggest departments that gets pressure from kind of the top down to implement some of this, because marketing is it's a profit center. It's going to help drive new initiatives that are profitable for the company. And so there's certainly a lot of pressures on CMOs in that regard. So can Amy or Lauren, do you guys want to start and speak to that one? What are the biggest pressure points?
I actually had a different perspective on it, Brian. So I never really felt any pressure specifically to implement AI in marketing, although I personally always wanted to continue to expand and make sure that we're on the cutting edge of what was happening in the market, and that we're learning and experimenting and trying new ways to communicate, granted within the regulatory and compliance guardrails that are established for us, to make sure that we're delivering the best customer experience. That being said, I felt tremendous pressure within the organizations that I've worked to justify marketing, because whereas maybe in a lot of different industries, not that I've been in potentially, but I think within consumers and products or other potential industries, the B2B industries in particular, not selling within the consumer space, at least the ones I've been in, I think that there's a lot of justification that needs to happen, because I do think that marketing is looked at more as an expense or a cost center than it's looked at as a profit center. And I think that that's potentially because sometimes, especially with these really long-term complex sales, so much happens between the time that you put out a tactic and that the actual sale occurs. And there's so many different touch points along the way that it becomes really difficult to kind of quantify the impact of marketing on that ultimate endpoint sale. And so for me, I think that where AI is tremendously important or could really help us is to help justify that marketing expense and really validate the long-term value of marketing to the executive levels of the organization. So a lot of really great articles I've read about AI where they're using like the statistical models to demonstrate the long-term, impact that it has on driving sales or driving growth, or even utilizing the statistical models to better help us quantify or understand the different customer behaviors around personas, or utilizing AI to monitor our call centers or our customer questions that are coming in through the website or chat, our chat bots, those types of things, I think would be of tremendous help in terms of just being able to go up and say, these are all of the things that we're doing to help deliver value to the organization and to help deliver ROI. So those are areas where I think, in my kind of realm of marketing, I think AI would and could have been tremendously helpful. And going forward is where I hope to, leverage it more fully.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. I mean, I think the chat is agreeing with that as well. Just especially in your space, coming from highly regulated industries, B2B, very interesting, kind of the different view of marketing that then may be the case in other companies and other industries. So really interesting perspective. Lauren, what have you seen?
I have seen something more in line with where you were going in terms of the pain points, but we are B2B manufacturing in a consumer products industry, so I can connect the actions to sales. It is still a very long selling cycle. Some of our boats are millions of dollars, so you don't just pop down to the grocery store and grab one. But I think for us, the biggest pressure I see, I do think there's an assumption and an easy intuitiveness around applying it to marketing because we're all consumers in our daily lives. So you see examples and use cases and you wonder, why aren't we doing that at our teams? So I kind of call this the silver bullet syndrome, which is my biggest pain point of, well, you have AI, don't you know what customer lifetime value looks like now? And I think that's really challenging for how early we are in our infancy. Is just the continuous management of expectations on what we can actually deliver versus where we're at today. I think there's an expectation around AI driving more transformational innovation. And I think the reality of how it's going to come to life in the early days, at least in my space, is going to be AI as a means to an end. So what can it help in terms of efficiency, better accuracy of decision making, so that really talented individuals can make better and better decisions and get some time for that innovation. But I don't see AI as kind of, sometimes I'll hear people talking about an AI strategy as if it's its own living, breathing thing. And I think this is going to come to life much more as an enabler, very similar to digital, similar to like what email did for all of us in business. And so just managing those expectations around what it is today versus what people feel like it is the biggest pain point, I think.
Absolutely. Jonathan, what are you finding are the biggest pressure points that you're seeing?
So I found what you were saying there, Lauren, very interesting about how people think it's going to be a transformational switch. And one of the things that we saw, especially last year, is that folks on the marketing side were getting pushed between two competing pressures, right? It could be, from board members, from the executive, they're like, hey, why aren't we using AI? Let's do that. And then you have legal and technology that's like, hey, let's slow this down and do it. And we found marketing was getting squeezed in between. So because of that, we created at OneMagnify a generative AI industry council. So we brought together folks from the pharmaceutical side, automotive, media, banking. We brought folks from academia. We brought in some AI ethicists to really talk about these questions. And so one of the individuals, a professor out of the University of Michigan, put together a framework where he showed that there are essentially three ways organizations are using AI to drive change. One of that is individual productivity, so all the tools that we have. One is kind of more of those transformational solutions, which that really tends to be a little more kind of what Amy was talking about earlier with the imaging, where we're going to train something from the ground up to be able to do something. Very impactful, usually doesn't apply to marketing, doesn't actually apply to most organizations. It's really about trying to automate and improve process. So taking those things that people are doing now and being able to pull that together. And a point that Amy was making about like just the ability to measure the impact of need. Because one of the things that we see is, when we're working with clients where it's, B2C, and we're selling directly to customers, all of the traditional media measurements work. So we do marketing mix modeling, we're able to decompose the volume, saturation points of economies of scale, determine all of those things. In B2B, it's much more difficult because it is that long sales cycle. Lauren's point you were making, there's just fewer sales that take place, so you have less data to base on. We don't have millions of consumers coming through and buying something through our e-commerce engine. So from that, it's actually we've seen the ability of AI to adjust to the data that's available, because one of the big trends for a number of years was all around multi-touch attribution. We're going to see what media people are exposed to, what they had impressions to, what they clicked on. Once Google finally put that third-party cookie to bed, that's not something that's available. We're seeing that applied now to CRM systems. So people are taking Markov models, Shapley value approaches to say, okay, these are all of the points, because all we need is a unique ID. We need what type of touch point it was and a timestamp. Based on that, we can build these attribution models where we can see how these are incrementally contributing to the conversion there. So it allows for more test and learn to go forward in that sense. So those are kind of the pressures that people are feeling. And we've seen people have the most success with trying to take, a smaller approach to say, hey, I want to be able to not just deploy AI because I want to deploy an AI system. I have a specific issue that I want to solve about the effectiveness of this media. What can help me with that? And then from that, Lauren, to your point, it's part of our tool set now that we can draw on to answer these questions.
Yeah, great points. And Jonathan, some of the things you just said kind of got my wheel spinning about some other conversations that we've had with chief data officers at our organization, where they're echoing a lot of these sentiments. And the bottom line is that AI is a tool. It's not an end in itself. And so a lot of chief data officers and CMOs are getting pressured these days from their board members, from the CEO, from the very top of their organization, saying, what are we doing with AI? There's all this stuff I'm reading about AI. How are we getting in front of AI? And those are important questions. But I think the counter to that is, it's not about what we're doing with AI per se. It's really about what problems are we going to solve and how are we taking advantage of any emerging technology, whether it's AI or anything else, to try to solve that problem. And I think you also mentioned, Jonathan, sort of using AI as a tool to help with your data. We kind of, on the one hand, think of data being necessary to feed into your AI, but I think AI is also a really valuable tool for structuring, enriching, and cleaning your data. So it kind of goes both ways, and that's one of the best AI use cases is especially with marketing data, using it to enrich and structure and clean things that otherwise might take a lot longer, or just not be viable at all, to enrich and structure and clean.
Definitely, and especially in the B2B space, going back to Amy's point about how, when you're working with different agency partners, you're working across different sales organizations, especially when we're dealing with international companies, that availability and the richness of the data isn't going to fit. So figuring out what that structure looks like, going back to that underlying core of the data, to your point, to be able to build it in a way that models or other solutions can utilize it.
Absolutely. So let's talk about what y'all see as the biggest challenges and opportunities in utilizing AI within marketing. We've talked about some of them, but kind of narrowly focusing on what you think are some of the one or two biggest challenges or opportunities. Amy, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I talked a little bit about the challenges, right? So I think We don't need to go there, but I'm actually really excited about AI. I mean, I think that the opportunities are tremendously significant. So, what I mentioned was kind of using the customer data and advanced analytic tools to create the personas. I was reading an article, I think you sent it to me, Brian. It kind of was an aha moment for me because we've always just used our own perceptions to create personas based on buying patterns or titles. And then all of a sudden I thought, well, of course, why aren't we using, the actual data to kind of come up with the personas? And so I thought that was really interesting based on their actual buying patterns. Another thing that we were sort of playing around with before I left GE was understanding persona buyer groups, right? So it's not just one person that was making those decisions. It was actually a buying group, a group of individuals who were sort of influencing each other. So I don't know to what extent AI can help us sort of decipher that sort of complex buying model where there's influencers and so on. And how do you impact a buying decision when it's a group of individuals that are ultimately making that buying decision? And how do you map out a campaign more smartly along those lines? Next best action is aspirational, but I love the concept of it. I know that there's places that are selling it and that maybe it's in place somewhere. I'd love to learn more about it if that's true. But understanding the progression across the buyer journey and where in the buyer journey a persona is and how to enter in the right type of content that they're interested in each stage and understand how they're working with each piece of content. So I think longer term, those are really fascinating aspects of it for me. Short term, content generation, of course, justification of our channel selections and spend. Those are all great opportunities. And then short term too, I think just utilizing it in customer service, better utilizing it to understand web support and then chat interactions. So all of those things, I think, are great opportunities, both short and long term. I'm really excited about the prospects of it. I think it has great potential.
Absolutely. Lauren, what do you think?
I'll give you one that I think a lot about. I don't know if anyone has opinions. I think it might be too early to know, but Jonathan just mentioned cookies. I think broadly, even if you're in B2B, you're going to get pulled more downstream competing with the consumer. And increasingly, you need to know more and more about your customers, your consumers, to get better at targeting, et cetera. And there are lots of things happening right now in the privacy space that makes that harder and more expensive. I'm interested to see if AI alleviates some of that need, expense, premium on customer data or not. Because I think you could make an argument or kind of build a hypothesis that you can make better and better decisions with less and less data. So I'm kind of interested to see what happens. I feel like these are two kind of competing trajectories, and I don't know really where they meet.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Jonathan, what are you picking up on there?
So a couple things. First, overall, like asking about some of the biggest concerns, going back to your question, is it's really about what the data is, or what data is used to train these systems, right? And so, Amy, this kind of goes to your point where you were talking about personas, because I think we've all seen in the news what's happened with OpenAI, where they've released this chat bot that has a voice very similar to someone who turned them down. And so what that does for an organization's credibility is key. So understanding the data that it's turning. But one of the coolest things that we've experimented with some clients around personas is actually taking all of that research data that was informed around personas, and then in the same way that OpenAI just, kind of does that, where you can have those customized chatbots that have a certain voice, being able to actually create systems. So we can call them chatbots, but they're really just kind of internal APIs, but that will examine something from a certain persona's perspective. So then when you're taking different content that's generated, being able to see how it will resonate with each different type of buyer or each different type of influencer and what they extract from it and whether or not it's resonating there to that point. With the next best action that you were mentioning, one of project that we worked on a number of years ago was with a quality group, but also marketing. So it was around, in the automotive space, around recalls. Because after recalls are sent out, when people don't respond to them, then it usually goes to a marketing agency for them to bring that forward. With that, able to put some of those next best action models in place to understand kind of the timing and what forms of communication, which is basically built off of a lot of segmentation because we're looking at that information. And that ties into what you were saying, Laura, about understanding the customer. Because one of the things that we have is we lose some accessibility to the data, and there are really kind of three types of customers that we usually deal with. There are known consumers, so we can think of those as the ones that are within our customer data platform. Our kind of known, unknown customers, those are the ones that we can maybe track through a website, we see what they're doing, but we don't know who they are. And then there's the unknown customers, those are the ones that are just seeing our impressions. And so it's in that kind of known, unknown customer information where we're able to track these journeys through different websites, usually across different applications there. And that becomes a real gold mine worth of data because those consumer activities and those behaviors that they have tell us so much more than we can ever get out of surveying from the data. And the last point I want to mention was, Amy, what you were saying around customer care. Because that industry council that I was mentioning, we just worked with one of the media clients there and did a presentation a couple months ago about them taking advantage of their customer care data. Because everyone knows that that's valuable. A lot of times it gets parked in a data lake because it's very difficult to surface those insights. All the traditional NLP tools like word clouds and that don't provide a lot of information. So using those large language models to use structured prompts to go through that information, we may have a customer that did fill out a survey and they said, this is amazing customer service. Well, that doesn't really tell us that much, but now we can use that, turn that into a prompt that goes back to either the call log or the chat log to go through that communication and say, what made this experience exceptional to the customer? And what we find more and more is that allows us to tap into that information and use that. The media organization use that as part of their training program because they like to highlight those customer care representatives that do an amazing job, and then use that to kind of create little vignettes that they use to train new folks coming on the team. Because for them, it's about going that extra mile, connecting with the customer and how that changes their experience.
Yeah, those are great points. Mass personalization is a theme that I'm hearing a lot, that there's a lot of opportunities both to segment folks in a more sophisticated way maybe, and to cater messages to them based on what we know about those customers in a way that seems very personalized at scale. So really taking the personalization and segmentation that already goes on in all kinds of sophisticated marketing organizations and taking that to the next level with AI, and then unlocking, like you said, Jonathan, the power of a lot of this unstructured data that's out there that previously has been very hard to analyze and to make part of your marketing analysis with respect to customers. I think those are both very powerful points that all of you touched on. So the looking to kind of the future of AI in B2B specifically, what steps are you all taking to prepare for these changes today? We've touched on a lot of them, but I guess where do you see things going, and how are you starting to position the organizations that you're in to take advantage of the opportunities and also to prepare for the challenges? Lauren, do you want to start us off?
I think a lot of what we're doing in terms of use case testing, always on test and learn, sorting through the opportunities is much of our preparation. As I look forward, the things that we're prompting some discussions around in terms of potential implications are increased cost of media, increased competition as a result of lower barriers to entry. I think we're spending a lot of time talking about what does this do for key purchase decisions and key purchase drivers? If you think about access to information, I kind of approach all of this as an assumption of ultimately we're getting to kind of information transparency and ease of access to compare very quickly, instantly. So if you can do that, what does that do for the way that you go to market, the way that you sell, the way that you choose what features you're going to build into your products, et cetera? So those are just some of the things that we're thinking about for eventual implications. but in terms of how we're preparing, more along the lines of sorting through the use cases and just going through and testing them all.
Absolutely. Amy, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm no longer, at GE, but at the time we were really thinking about just educating our teams on the different tools that are available and sort of the capabilities. We're also doing a number of different lean workouts just in terms of making sure that we're streamlining, whether it's with the vendors or whether it's just our own capabilities with distribution to figure out how we can collect the data or get the full data across the entire customer experience. So just trying to close those gaps as best we can. And then I think from a global perspective, they were taking a really hard look at, our customer experience journey as a whole across the entire organization. And it is a journey. I think it's not right. It's not going to be quick, especially when it's a huge organization and you really want to do it correctly. So I think those are all things that, as an organization, were big decisions that had to be made.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan?
So I would say kind of where we see it going is it's going to automate those mundane tasks, allowing people to focus more on strategic initiatives. So it's getting an understanding of personalization of what it means, being able to really resonate with whoever we're trying to speak to. So it's gone from broad messaging to more specific messaging to trying to get messaging that really resonates. And we're preparing for it in a couple of different ways. One is we're investing in talent. So, bringing on folks that have training in these different approaches, not only from kind of the technical side, but also the conceptual side, because as the technology is advancing so quickly, we need to have an understanding of how these pieces fit together. Trying to develop different innovative solutions to solve specific problems, not using AI for the sake of AI, but using it to solve problems that we've struggled with in the past. Collaborating with leaders across the industry, having conversations, seeing what's working for people, kind of being able to separate out kind of the hype of what AI can do from how it's actually making an impact for businesses. And then the last thing is really the clients that we work with, a lot of it is education, because, we go through, and I've done numerous, conversations with different clients that we work with, just talking about what AI is, what it means, from machine learning examples, how people are using that, to computer vision, to generative AI, talking about those different pieces, seeing how they resonate, how they can fit.
Yeah, great points. One of the questions in the chat is about, so a lot of our discussion has really focused on how your organization can become ready for AI. What considerations should you be making now to plan for the future and to try to implement some immediate use cases? But we have a question from Gerardo about what steps can marketers take to prepare for these changes? So marketers as individuals, what steps can you take to ensure that you continue to have relevance and success? What new skills do you need? What actions should you be taking today? Amy, do you want to start us off?
I mean, I think it's just really important to stay on top of your game and to take advantage of all the opportunities that are out there, to learn about all the different tools, to read, and just to stay on top of your field. As always, there's opportunities, I'm sure, within your own company. I had sent a number of individuals to some different training, but then there's just opportunities like this. There's a number of articles that are out there. There's different, I know you all had, I think I watched a webinar you all did on the 8 different types of tools that are out there for AI. I mean, there's just a wealth of information out there right now. I think it's important that everyone kind of takes ownership of their own kind of professional development and seeks out some of those opportunities to learn and to continue to experiment and to grow. And you don't have to pay a lot of money for it, right? It's out there, and these are great things to kind of take just a little bit of time out of your day or your week to and I know it's hard to find that time, but even if you can just block out, an hour or 2 a week on your calendar, if possible, just to commit to your own professional development, I think it's a great opportunity to do so.
Absolutely. Super important. Lauren?
I would say the same. I think it's kind of the next evolution. It's like learning a new language. You just got to start somewhere and practice, be at the table and read everything you can read, and you'll start to pick up and start to connect the dots and how to apply it in your day to day, and just generally build your proficiency.
Absolutely. Jonathan?
I would say I would echo both of those sentiments, but I would also say focus in on measurement. Think about what it is that your marketing wants to do. And if you're trying to drive awareness, if you're trying to drive conversion, whatever that is, focusing in on that and then looking at everything that you read about AI through that lens. So being able to tie it back to how is this going to make an impact on whatever I'm really trying to drive in this, whatever key performance indicator I have for these campaigns that I'm working on, how can I then use these tools to help increase that?
Great points. So we got a couple minutes left, so we'll do a lightning round. So in one phrase or a few, if you could answer what's one critical insight or takeaway that you think folks should take from today about the future of AI in marketing. Jonathan, why don't you start with this one?
I would say it's all about providing customers with an experience that resonates with them. So it's about that personalization and that understanding of intent.
Great point. Amy?
Yeah, I mean, I would sort of echo that. I think it's about, the predictive analytics are going to enhance marketing insights and decision making to deliver that personalized customer experience. And then at the same time, hopefully deliver a greater ROI for the organizations we work for.
Absolutely.
I would say it's going to add increased pressure on brands and marketing. Sorry, I'm getting an echo. I can stop answering if everyone's getting that.
We can hear you now.
Okay. I think it's going to create increased pressure to demonstrate truly enhancing differentiation from a customer experience standpoint. So I would echo what they shared. I think it'll become more and more table stakes, and probably harder and harder to win with the customer if you're behind the 8 ball.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So I'm hearing a lot of focus on the customer, I think, and ROI as well, doing things that really move the needle, not just AI for AI's sake. So I want to thank our panelists today. These were really fantastic insights. Really enjoyed the conversation. To everyone who attended, thank you very much for joining us today. If you missed any of the webinar or want to rewatch anything, the recording of this webinar will be available right afterwards if you just refresh the page. Also want to say a big thank you to our partners at OneMagnify. That the article that Amy mentioned, we have in one of the calls to action that will rotate. We also have another OneMagnify webinar coming up next month on June 13th, where Jonathan will be joining us as well. So I want to thank OneMagnify for their support in making this webinar possible. We'll see you all again next time. Really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Thank you.